first of all, I think the day has been very exciting, and you've heard a lot of speakers cover very interesting topics, very insightful conversations throughout the first half of the day. And I think you have all been a very, very wonderful audience. So let's have a big round of applause for the audience first. I know that this is the session just before lunch. Can we have a little bit more energy, please? OK, great. So thank you so much for joining this panel conversation. Rapid innovation and experimentation combined with cost, control, trust, and cybersecurity. All of these are top considerations at the heart of the enterprise AI strategy. And if you look at what has happened over the last few quarters, there have been recent geopolitical developments which have actually sharpened the calls for sovereign, open ecosystems in technology in general, and in AI in particular. So this has actually stirred the debate, the classic debate of open source versus proprietary platforms. And to discuss this particular topic, we have a stellar panel today. You've all heard the introductions of my fellow panelists. So today, we are really going to ask each of the panelists very, very important questions on what are they seeing on the ground as far as real innovation, experimentation is concerned. What drives real progress? Is it more open source? Is it proprietary? Or is the future going to be hybrid? So let's get started. And we will reserve a few minutes at the end of this particular panel conversation for questions from the audience. I know I've actually been following all the other sessions as well. You have asked a lot of very interesting, very important questions. So please wear your thinking hats, and I will expect and welcome questions at the end of the panel conversation. So let's get started. So Kapil, my first question is to you. So you, having worked, you're working in EPAM, and you have worked with a lot of enterprises globally. And right now, you're working with some Indian enterprises and GCCs as well. So what has been your experience? What have you seen that enterprises are looking, whenever they're working with AI systems? Are they leaning more towards open source versus proprietary, or is this a mix?
Yeah, thanks, Sandeep, for asking that question and giving me an opportunity to start this conversation. I think, yeah, so we at EPAM, get an opportunity to work with a lot of clients. So as a part of that, I will give a perspective of what we see, when it comes to open source versus platform adoption in terms of our clients. So let me start, with the open source first. So open source, there are a lot of clients that we have, who definitely reach out to us, for some help, in implementing some MVPs or some POCs. And when it comes to open source, what we are seeing is there's a rapid, rapid engagement that we see when it comes to adoption or when it comes to doing some, quick POCs, just testing out the technologies. So we have a lot of clients like, from retail or, from some telecom sector who want to use these open source platforms like Hugging Face, wherein there is no lock-in as such in terms of the licensing cost, and they can quickly prototype. So rapid prototyping is what we see, when it comes to open source, which is helping our customers a lot. And second point that I see here is more from, the global community support that we get in the open source. For example, the way, RAG adoption has happened in the industry, there's a lot of multiple open source projects. They have converged, and they have, helped the enterprise to build the advanced RAG systems. It has been possible because of the open source communities. And third traction that we see in open source is, around when it comes to building something very proprietary. So we have some very large clients who want to build or fine-tune the LLMs based on their own data sets. So their open source is definitely the way to go. So open source does bring a lot of benefits to our client, but at the same time, there is the flip side to that as well. So we get a lot of customers reaching out to us where they say like there are a lot of tools available for doing a similar task, like say for orchestration, for monitoring, for governance. So the way open source ecosystem has evolved, there are competing tools for almost everything. So our clients reach out to us, like say they are getting confused, they need a lot of consultancy help. It's good for EPAM as a vendor, but when we see from clients' perspective, they get confused, like what to implement. And when it comes to complexity of integration, that complexity itself is increased when you have multiple tools and then a scalable solution that you want to deploy. So that's what creates some problem when it comes to deploying these solutions to production. So what we are seeing, at EPAM, what we are seeing when it comes to give our point of view, it's going in a direction where it's a mix. It's a mix of both open source and proprietary platforms. Open source to be used more for quick experimentation and maybe where you want to do a very large workload deployments. Platforms is the way to go. So it's not really open source versus proprietary. I would say it's open source plus proprietary when it comes to enterprise implementations, Sandeep.
Sure. Actually, that's a very, very balanced approach that you have actually mentioned. So let me just quickly take your view on the vendor lock-in. Very briefly, if you could just mention, I think there is a concern that many enterprises face with the issue of vendor lock-in in case of proprietary platforms.
Yes. Let me give a picture like what exactly vendor lock-in means for our clients. For example, if you are logged in with a particular vendor and all these major providers, they have a very smart way of getting clients logged into the system in terms of the APIs, in terms of the data storage, in terms of the cloud computing. So once you are logged into that that particular platform, there's no scope for your own independent work that you want to do or you want to carry out. So there's a lot of dependencies that comes for that particular system or platform that you are engaged in. And what we see is there are a lot of regulations coming up, like the way geopolitical situations are changing. Even for the Indian government, if you see there's regulations coming in where we want to push more of your customer sensitive data related implementations to be in-house in your own premises. There are a lot of regulations when it comes particularly to banking and financial services sector, wherein what we see is the clients who want to build applications more for customer sensitive data, they are moving towards an open source one. And wherever they want to do some deployments on a mass scale use cases like chatbots, they normally go for platforms like Azure AI, and they just integrate it on that.
Okay. So I think in a lot of regulated industry verticals, for example, for financial services and healthcare, a lot of the discussion is also driven by compliance and regulatory activities, right?
Yes.
So I think let me just turn the conversation to Sharmistha. You come from a financial services background. So from that lens, where regulations, IP protection, and vendor accountability are very, very important, how does the word proprietary provide the control that the enterprises need? And do you think that open source can still deliver quick prototyping, innovation, experimentation that Kapil was mentioning about?
Yeah, thank you, Sandeep. So as you rightly said that financial or any organizations more to healthcare, they have a lot of compliance and we have to do due diligence in every single line of code. Lot of governance and lot of risk approvals are needed. In that respect, open source is definitely one way to understand and quickly get the innovations, what are they doing, what the entire landscape or the ecosystem on data, AI or whatever technology you are choosing, how the external world is looking at. And if you have talent in-house, then it is, of course, you can study those and quickly build the POCs based on your specific organization's risk policies and governance and build a quick POC in-house. It again depends upon the nurture of the talent, whether they are encouraged to build or they are encouraged to buy. And of course, if you have the talent and if you can afford the cost, you can, of course, build your IPs and core differentiators as not only your reusable solution, but also it can be reused through APIs to any vendor platform. So by that way, you can also prevent the vendor lock-in. So vendors come with their own proprietary solutions, but if you have a reusable solution built in-house and you have a quick framework of integration, either through APIs or messaging, then it serves both the purpose. So some of the BUs can go ahead and use those proprietary homegrown solutions, and some of the BUs who wants vendor solution can still go with the vendor solutions, but to prevent the vendor lock-in, you give them some kind of accessible APIs to quickly integrate on top of that. By that, you also foster development and IP creator innovative system within your organization, and you use and re-leverage your core IPs. Of course, it also prevents your cost, because every time if you are innovating a new algorithm, you have the talent and you have done it for some of your in-house solution, then you don't have to buy the same kind of IP from a vendor, and you can re-leverage and reuse those across your other solutions or your other differentiating market products.
Interesting. You're talking about a modular API-first architecture to be integrated with proprietary tech platforms to avoid vendor lock-in. Actually, very interesting. I think one of the important considerations is also cost. So we will, let's take a deep dive into the cost of ownership. So Manisha, this question is for you. So when you look at both open source as well as proprietary platforms, one of the most important considerations for enterprises is TCO, the overall cost of ownership, right? And the strategic value that these frameworks and platforms provide to enterprises. So in your experience, having worked with financial services firms for a very, very long period of time, can you throw some more light on what are some of the real hidden costs while working with both open source and proprietary platforms?
Thank you, Sandeep. So this is working? You can hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So, you talked about hidden costs. Normally in banking and payments, right, where I've spent most of my time, we are very risk averse, right? And while there is a technology cost of, buying a proprietary system, there is also a cost associated with regulatory fines. There is a reputational, a disruption in terms of reputation. If one transaction on your card today is rejected because of a false positive, in case it was not actually a fraud, but we stopped your transaction, it is a big loss of reputation for us. So when it comes to high availability systems, you have to take a decision then and there. The cost of reputation is very high. The open source side also has hidden costs. Like Sharmistha talked, there is cost of having an engineering team. There is a cost of having a compliance team, a team that watches out for vulnerabilities, in the open source. So there is like an ecosystem around open source as well. While the initial cost of procuring open source could be very low, over a period of time it does come with risks. So you have to have a team that watches out for the risks. So from a proprietary perspective, while the cost is high, the TCO is high upfront, but it does come with, out-of-the-box rules. It comes with proprietary data. The models are built on proprietary data that we may not have, or it could have high availability in terms of very low outages, or even, like an automated audit-ready documentation for you, right? So that you can handle regulatory audits. So overall, I think from a fraud risk perspective, proprietary works better in financial services. Even though the TCO is high, we really bring down the burden on the association of, doing the right thing. But open source is always great for for innovation, for marketing programs, for text analytics, for sentiment analytics, where a little bit of downtime would not actually, affect the decision. So for us at Fiserv, it's a mix of both. We have, high availability fraud-related transactions. We buy proprietary data models where we, for example, certain models have IP addresses that we don't have to detect fraud. So it's a mix. And we also do a lot of custom on top of proprietary. So that's how the TCO is really tilted a little in favor of proprietary for risk models and more innovation on the marketing models, et cetera, on the open source side.
Interesting. So I think when you look at the TCO, the scenario is slightly different in maybe regulated industry verticals, which places enough emphasis on a lot of, let's say, regulations, compliance, customer experience, high availability that you talked about. Let me also take Vivek's view on this. Vivek also comes from a sort of regulated industry vertical. So what are your views, Vivek, on this?
Thanks, Sandeep. First of all, very happy to be speaking in this forum. Very motivated gathering just before lunch, so many people intently listening. I hope the session is interesting. If it's not, don't worry, you'll appreciate your lunch more at least. So to this question, I also come from a highly regulated industry, which is healthcare, where trust is critical, at least in theory. I'm not sure how many of us trust our hospitals. We always feel that they're prescribing unnecessary tests. They're making us redo some tests. They're giving us fake medications. So trust is inherently not there in our system. And that is one thing that all the regulatory authorities and us as a health system are striving to strengthen. So trust is fundamental to us. When we talk of total cost of ownership and comparing open source and proprietary software, as she also mentioned, it is not a point-in-time evaluation of total cost of ownership. What does it cost us to buy a software today? The additional costs, of course, come in the form of what does it take to maintain my software? That is basic. Secondly, more important is what does it take for us to innovate in that software? If I take an open source model and I have some engineers work on it and put up some solution today, do I have the investment to innovate in it? So if it is going to be a core component of what we deliver, be it in patient experience or be it in core clinical areas, then it becomes critical for us to factor in the investment that it takes to innovate. In which cases, a proprietary solution may offer a better value proposition for us. When we talk of vendor lock-in, of course, the panel mentioned vendor lock-in as a negative in terms of proprietary solutions. We don't look at vendor lock-in as a proprietary versus open source. Vendor lock-in is how easily you can shift out of a solution. Even if your open source framework stores data in a very niche format, and that causes a huge exit barrier for you, that is also vendor lock-in for us. Whereas a proprietary solution may be storing data in an open format and may have the necessary APIs for you to migrate out of it, in which case it is not really a lock-in. So long as the exit barrier is low, the difference between open source and proprietary also becomes lower for us. And what we fundamentally look at in healthcare, especially in critical systems, as she also mentioned, is high availability, consistency of performance, low errors. So whichever solution can offer all of these is important. A core aspect of healthcare is the security. A lot of PII data, sensitive data that is there more than any other industry. And data leakages is a major issue for us. More so in developed markets that we are seeing, which will soon hit the Indian market also. A lot of ransomware attacks are entering the health system. And any healthcare system uses 30 to 40 different applications. The interoperability of these applications and security breaches can happen with the weakest link in any of these applications. So we need to keep the entire ecosystem in mind when we factor for security breaches. The ransomwares that are hitting developed markets, specifically we're seeing a lot of it happening in the Middle East now. India is not far away from it. There are minor breaches that are happening in the Indian market, which we hear of. So that is also another factor that we need to be cognizant of. All of this is additional compliance cost. The cost that it takes for me to secure my platforms, cost that it takes for interoperability, cost that it takes for me to make it exit friendly, cost of innovation. All of these form the total cost of ownership for us and will fundamentally then drive the decision.
Okay, wonderful. I think we have a very, very broad framework as to what should be included in a TCO conversation. So Vivek, you talked a lot about security, trust, and Manisha, you also talked about compliance. I will first get your views on this, Vivek, and then I'll come to you, Sharmistha. There's this broader discussion about trust, security, and compliance with regards to open source versus proprietary platforms. Proprietary platforms come with their own certifications. Various kinds of certifications are available for proprietary platforms, which may not be available for open source frameworks, tools, and libraries. So how do you balance out these kind of discussions when they come up in your enterprise story?
So how we fundamentally can assess security, not just in healthcare, but in any of the software discussions, is the kind of network that uses that particular software. Be it proprietary or open source, if there is a large user base that is there, that will give you comfort. Because if a large user base is using it, they would have factored in the investments or the innovations to factor in security. That is one fundamental indicator. Proprietary platforms also give you guarantees that they comply with certain security norms and certifications. But again, without a wide user base, there is no value to that word.
Sure.
That is critical in healthcare, and that is why you see healthcare being a slow adopter of technology in general. The final impact that you can see in healthcare is something that can impact a patient's life.
Okay.
A wrong decision that can directly show you massive impact in terms of a patient's life, which is why healthcare is very, very circumspect in looking at all of these. So a wide user base is what will give us comfort, especially in peripheral software. When it comes to core applications, it will entail a thorough inspection by internal teams. Running open source for core applications will require massive investments, because it will require a huge team to be there on top of the application 24/7 to ensure that there are no compromises in availability. So even if transparency is there, even if the security code is validated, you will still need to have a huge team that manages all of this.
Okay.
A proprietary solution backed by a huge user base is what gives us comfort.
Sure. So as far as trust, cybersecurity, compliance are concerned, do you see similar trends in the financial services space?
Yeah, so in general, whether you go for open source or proprietary, you need to conduct a lot of risk and adversarial tests also. So all those cyber security threats, where are the data leakage points are arising, whether it is open source or you are inheriting a proprietary, you need to test it, because your firewall or the organization firewall may be different, right? And some of this may not go through that your firewall. So resilient testing, and seeing that, because the organization owns its own data, seeing that whether transparency and explainability, right, exists with your data. How are you able to build the customer trust and explain to your business stakeholders, or it is a B2C model, how you're explaining to your customers what loyalty point they are getting in terms of simple language. So even if you are using open source, the cost is huge, because when you inherit that and put it in your enterprise, customize it with your data, you need to invest some money to bring that trust and bring that robustness factor to ensure that the software is foolproof and resilient. On the other hand, if you are building a proprietary, it is already a homegrown solutions, you have already taken care of the organizational nuances, data, and privileges that you need on the day one, like the privacy by design, or first day when you are starting to build the solution. So it will be more easier to adapt to and extend to based on your organizational changes in data and whatever AI models you are building.
Okay, so Sharmistha, I think one of the other important points, especially with regards to open source, that has been briefly alluded to in this panel conversation, is the issue of support for open source ecosystems. So in your experience so far, have you seen some general, considerable level of support for open source systems in India? Have you experienced so far?
I have faced problems when getting, even from Google, I have used some libraries where they were the pioneers in differential privacy, some privacy libraries. So all of a sudden they deprecated the library, they came out with a new library, and it is not backward compatible. So TensorFlow started to fail. So in that respect, if you are just using the same logic, building your own privacy libraries, maybe it is a little bit cost heavy, but you know that who knows in your organization, and you can quickly fix it.
So Kapil, may I pose this question to you as well? I think you've worked with global organizations. What kind of trends are you seeing globally with regards to support for open source technologies and platforms?
Yeah, so again, as I said, I would always say like choice is not binary when it comes to clients. They are going for mix, like both open source and proprietary. We need to identify the use cases, and we definitely don't want vendor lock-ins there. So that's what I would say. Like choice should not be binary. You have to you don't want let's say some geopolitical decision change your entire AI roadmap. So you don't want to get stuck with that as well. So you have to plan for it. You have to. I mean, we are recommending our clients to create platforms, AI platforms, so that that can help. Obviously, for larger clients, they are creating their own AI platforms. They are doing a lot of internal capability build-up is also required for the AI, Gen AI capabilities. So that is also something that we are helping our customers with. But yeah, when it comes to open source versus platform, I would always say like it has to be mix of both of them.
Okay. Any quick comments from both of you on the overall support issue that may be there with open source? Because proprietary, technology platforms and ecosystems are clearly well developed. If not well developed, at least they are in a certain progression stage. What about open source?
So for us, even if it's open source, uh, we've given it's Fiserv, right? We have thousands of banks using, even if it's open source built, we have scalability, right? So we have teams that support such structures. So yes, it comes with a cost, but we have to stay invested in a support team.
Okay, so you find enough number of skilled professionals in India who can
Yes.
actually support that.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
what are you saying, Vivek?
Scale of an organization will define how much support it can manage with externally. If your organization is big enough, you'll be able to build a support team that can effectively handle open source software also. My earlier point, a wide user network will indicate that the platform has enough support if necessary. In this day and age, documentation, code parsing has become much easier in terms of support. Easy exit is what we look at as an alternative in case there is no support.
Okay, great. So, I think we should move on to the next segment of this conversation. And over the last couple of quarters, we have actually seen, as I talked about this trend earlier as well, a lot of talk has been about development of sovereign open technology ecosystems, and especially about AI as well. And all of you have seen different AI regulations, frameworks coming up in different countries. We saw one act in the European Union earlier this year. We have seen some kind of activity in the US as well, and we have seen some frameworks being launched in India as well. These are committee reports and frameworks that have been launched, especially for the banking sector in India. So I will ask Kapil this. So with governments and big tech influencing AI standards and the overall regulations and compliance, do you think that relying on proprietary ecosystems will only increase risk for enterprises? I think there have been some examples also wherein because of proprietary systems, because of some ban that was there on some company here in India, the whole data was locked out for that specific company. So do you feel that enterprises in India should actually take the more open source way as one step towards progressing towards, let's say, open technology or AI ecosystem?
See, I think somewhere we also need to follow these regulations. So when it comes to, for example, the DPDP Act, which is coming out of India, I mean, it has certain regulations that need to be followed. So any, customer sensitive data, if you are building some AI on sensitive data, it has to be within your premises. Particularly in BFSI sector, these are all regulations which are already applicable. But in general, the DPA Act will let you, build any sensitive information. It has to be within your premises. So the choices of platforms will also be driven by regulations. For that matter, you see, like you are talking about the EU AI regulation law, the thing that recently happened. So there are a lot of directions which enterprises are taking where they are again going on a hybrid strategy where they are building the sensitive use cases, the customer data sensitive use cases within open source ecosystem and on their own premises. And when it comes to large scale mass deployment of use cases, they happen on your cloud or on the platforms. But one thing that I also want to point out, like we need to follow these regulations. So regulations will drive, what kind of, technology that you need to adapt there. And also, there has to be some, interoperability standards that needs to be set up. That's where, leaders need to come up with, common standards so that, as, you're talking about the exits. So exits become easy from one platform to other platform, and that becomes easier. So I think we'll see more regulations in this area and, more standards coming up. That will shape up, in a proper direction.
I think alongside regulations, we also need to have standards, as you said, because without this, actually, regulations can stifle innovation, AI innovation. Okay, so Manisha, this is a question to you. With multinationals such as yours, and given all of these geopolitical trends that you're seeing globally right now, so what kind of, where do you see the use of open source? Are you actually seeing the advocacy of open source internally, or are you seeing a greater preference towards proprietary platforms? Because the overall discussion is about creating open, sovereign AI ecosystems or technology ecosystems. So in multinationals, what are you seeing, especially with your company as the context?
There is, of course, we as a global organization, we end up working with global vendors, right? And they come with their own proprietary models, specific to each jurisdiction, let's say. But we do see a space because, like you talked about, there's a vendor lock-in. Each country has its own regulations, and each country understands its data best, right? And they don't want to be bound by a standard model sometimes. So what we've done in some cases, for example, in the area of financial crime, again, it is, let's say, a proprietary model, but we do have our own open source, if I may say, analysis that we do at our end, and then we can go back and change an algorithm in the proprietary model. We have understanding with such vendors where we could go and change a rule, right? So I think open source still has a role to play in it. We are learning from our data every day. We are experiencing it every day. So, but a combination of proprietary and open source works great in those regulatory scenarios.
Okay, so a combination of open source and proprietary, depending on enterprise requirements, depending on specific use cases, that's the way to go. I think you've clearly shared this view. Any other quick comments from each of the other panelists on this? What is the future? Is it more hybrid, as we see right now? Is it more leaning towards open, or is it more hybrid? Kapil?
I see it's leaning more towards hybrid, and what I also see is like, it's hybrid with a smart governance coming from the enterprise. So you need to have a proper, AI policy layer set up, and enterprise needs to come up and set up those enterprise, those governance layer, be it, data, compliance, security, ethics. There has to be proper governance, and then teams can go and adapt, and they can experiment on either open source or, platforms. If your governance layer is, very robust, then that will definitely, that's what I see as, the direction.
Okay, Sharmistha, any other views?
Yeah, so it's hybrid and allowing the talent, both external and internal, to collaborate and foster. So because no innovation happens single-mindedly, so along with, when you are bringing a hybrid solution, looking at some of the open source, encourage your developers also to talk to them. Have an open system of fostering innovation across. That can definitely give the hybrid solution a more matured outcome.
Okay, great. Vivek, any last closing comments?
It is definitely hybrid, and it is not that open source has an altruistic motive behind it. It is also part of the market forces only. If you see many of the open source models that are available today, many are backed by tech giants, which is part of their business strategy for wider adoption of other aspects of their platform. It also brings in certain benefits in terms of flexibility and the innovation. Proprietary platforms will be forced to match that in terms of customizations and configurability options that they offer. So it is definitely hybrid, but fundamentally as a business strategy.
Okay.
And the market forces.
Okay, wonderful. So I think this has been a lovely panel conversation. Let me just open the floor for Q&A from the audience.